I'll sort of, all right. So a few days ago, my wife, Sarah, noticed a $1,000 deposit in our checking account that she couldn't account for. And she asked me about it, and I couldn't account for it either. Where did this $1,000 come from? We were staring at each other in the kitchen for a good 5 seconds, and then she blurted out, "The car, Mr. Clifford." So what she was referring to is the fact that Mr. Clifford and Ms. Monty had bought a car from us, an old Buick, for $1,000. If you're wondering, boy, that seems like awfully cheap for a working car, it is awfully cheap for a working car because the car has a lot wrong with it. The air conditioner, totally shot. The passenger side door doesn't open. And the windows don't go down. So it's kind of a problem in the summer. It can work if you drive and sort of grab the window from the inside and you have really strong fingertips, it can work, but it's a lot. And that's not even, the best part is you have to turn I'm not making this up, you have to turn the car off very precisely, pull out the key. If you don't, the battery drains and the car dies in about 10 minutes. Other than that though, it's tip top. Mr. Clifford, how's the Buick driving?
Yeah, it's fixed.
The point is not that we sold the Monty Clifford's a lousy car. The point is that I, and not my wife, orchestrated the entire transaction. I was the one that put out the notice that the car was for sale. When the Monty Cliffords responded, I was the one that texted them, and we had this whole thing. And then I was even the one who busted out my handy, I'm a 21st century man app that you take a photo of a check with, and then it goes right to your checking account. I was really happy with myself. I was the one who even did that. $1,000 check, bam. Yes. A week later, I couldn't remember it. So teaching and learning types like me have a lot of catchphrases, and one is, memory is the residue of thought. Memory is the residue of thought. It means about what you think. It means that the more you think about something, the more likely you are to recall it later. So why couldn't I remember the Buick transaction, but my wife could? Is it that my wife is smarter than I am? She is smarter than I am, and that's a little annoying. But it's probably not why she recalled the sale and I did not. It's probably because she's the one that handles the day-to-day of our finances at home. She pays bills, she bounces the checkbook, and I do the big picture stuff like retirement, children's college funds, stuff like that. So maybe that's it. But brains are mysterious, and so is memory. And here's another mysterious recall story. I returned to Taft a little over a year ago after being away on sabbatical for an entire year. And here's the very first student I saw. Returners will probably know, yeah, it's Reese Olmsted. Hey, Reese. Except I didn't say, hey, Reese. She said, hey, Mr. Wilson, I haven't seen you in a while. And I went, hey, girl. So you know when someone doesn't know your name. And I knew that Reese knew that I didn't know it. So I sheepishly said, sorry, I forgot your name. And she let me off the hook with it's Reese. It wasn't snarky like that. She was very nice. It's Reese, but it was bad. My inability to come up with Reese's name was ironic for two reasons. First, when I left, I'd been academic dean, which meant that I knew the name of just about every student in the school, just like Mr. Clifford does now, right, Mr. Clifford?
Not quite.
Anyway, Reese had every reason to expect that I would be able to come up with her name, because we'd had many conversations her lower mid-year. The other reason it was ironic is that I was returning as Taft's new teaching and learning guy. So I was supposed to be able to show students how to memorize important information. And I had explicitly tried to know the names of all the students who had been here when I had been here the previous year, and so that I wouldn't have a massive name whiff. And then it happens to the very first student I see. Why did that happen? I think the answer is, in this case, the illusion of knowing. Another one of those catchphrases teaching and learning people like, the illusion of knowing. I knew that, and I still know, that if you want to remember specific stuff, you have to practice remembering that stuff and space out the remembering over time. So if it really mattered to me that I'd be able to recall the names of the students looking at their faces, I should go through the TAF Facebook, cover up the names, and try to conjure the names when I see the faces. And then do it again the next day, and then a couple days after that, and about a week after that, and get it into my memory. That's called spaced retrieval practice. Spaced retrieval practice, and it really, really works. I'd sort of done that and had some success. And I think that some success led to my illusion of knowing. That's when you think you know something because you understand it when you read it, or you can kind of get it when somebody else does it, or in my case, you know some names that go with some faces, and then either you run out of time, and you don't self-test, or you don't have someone else quiz you. And that's where the problem comes in. So you hope, but don't verify that you got it. You don't got it, and I didn't got it, and I got embarrassed in front of Reese. So what actually happens in your head when you practice and remember enough to get it? You rewire your brain, and that's called neuroplasticity. The younger you are, by the way, the easier it is to change your brain, which is good news for you all, less good news for me and some of the people in the back of the room. Here is a simple diagram from a book called Neuroteach. There we go, okay? So some of you have no doubt seen things like this. Brain cells, dendrites going off. We've got the axon and myelin sheath, whose function is pretty unclear. You got synapses that connect the neurons with one another. So exactly how these parts of the brain change to fire more efficiently when you improve or learn something well really isn't all that clear. Neuroscientists really don't know 100%, and they disagree. But when through practice you evolve from being a not very good drummer or lacrosse player to being an accomplished drummer or lacrosse player, you have rewired your plastic brain. That much is clear. So neuroplasticity is handy too, because sometimes we learn the wrong thing and have to unlearn it. So here's a quick example. Yes. Thank you. I'm going to sing one line from I know it's early, but I'm going to sing one line from the middle of a song. One line from the middle of a song. And if you know the next line, I want you to sing it. Please? Okay. All right, here we go. Ready? Sing the next line if you know it. A singer in a smoky room. Thank you. Thank you. So at least some of you, maybe many of you, I couldn't hear you guys too well, but maybe you were singing it too. I don't know. You know the "Don't Stop Believin'" lyrics so well that you don't even need to hear the song's distinctive piano intro to skip right to the correct part and sing along. There's a whole area of musicology dedicated to the links between music and memory. And if by mentally pulling up those Journey lyrics, you were just transported to the last time you heard that song, or the first time you heard that song, and who you were with and what you were doing, you experience how powerfully music can be linked to memory. The song I had on as you walked in, by the way, was from 1971. The reason I had it on, it's by the Cornelius Brothers and Sister Rose. I put it on because I heard that song for the first time. It's a 1971 song. I heard it for the first time this summer. Since then, and I sang right along. It was freaky. Anyway, I said that I would use music to show you that you can, with practice, layer new learning over old. So I'd be willing to wager that you have in your head song lyrics you used to think were right, but you were totally wrong about. And then when you found out what the right lyrics were, you still heard the wrong ones in your head. Maybe not. But probably. I know that's happened to me 1,000 times. So if you thought the "Don't Stop Believin'" lyrics, instead of being "the smell of wine and cheap perfume," was "a smelly wine and cheaper few," cheaper few being what you serve with smelly wine, I guess. It would take you a long time not to hear those wrong lyrics in your head. But with neuroplasticity means with practice, you will get there. Okay, so far, I've used, the examples of thinking that I've used, remembering a bank deposit or someone's name or song lyrics, have been about straight recall rather than the kind of learning that you do in high school. So what about passage analysis, reading comprehension, problem solving? What about those? Are those different? And the answer is yeah, they are. They are different, and they're harder. It won't surprise you to hear. Compared to the other stuff that they do, brains aren't all that good at schoolish learning. They're not that good at schoolish learning. They're much better at seeing, moving, reacting. School learning is hard, slow, and unpredictable. That's why brains would rather remember than really think. It's kind of a shortcut. It's why when you were in middle school and your teacher gave a test on the times tables or state capitals or whatever, and you already knew it, you internally and maybe externally, you went, yes. What you were really saying is, I don't have to think. I can just remember. It's easy. I'm not saying brains aren't curious. Okay, we are all interested in things. Most of us are interested in a lot of things, but not necessarily schoolish things, especially if those schoolish things get really complex. So here's a really basic diagram of the mind from a book called Why Don't Students Like School by Daniel Willingham. Yeah. So take a look at it. Environment, attention, working memory, long-term memory, let's look it up. Factual knowledge and procedural knowledge is what that says. Remembering, learning, forgotten, right? Okay, ooh, sorry. So notice where the learning is and all the stuff around it, right? So you have to pay attention to incoming information, okay, which can be hard in the first place if you find it uninteresting. Hold some of that stuff in your working memory, right? And then combine it with stuff from your long-term memory to create new knowledge and understanding. And then try not to forget it. It's actually pretty hard. If you find certain subjects harder than others, if you find school in general hard, it's because it is hard. It's hard for brains to do this. Plus, school is weird, okay? And that's not, I'm not talking about TAF necessarily, I'm talking about all schools. Schools are weird. Schools in general. They start too early. They break your life down into subjects. They're questionable learning environments. Bells keep going off. And there's a 3-month break every year, but you're supposed to remember everything you learned before the break, after the break. That's weird, right? So why are schools set up this way? I'm not going to launch into it. It's basically old ideas about why and how, what and how kids should learn. Summer's off to bring in the harvest, literally, and other reasons I won't delve into, except to say that for the most part, schools aren't changing. Certainly not, probably not in time for your high school experience. So let's recap and bring it home. Okay, even though memory is the residue of thought, our memories aren't fixed, foolproof, or fully retrievable. But if we target stuff we want to recall and space out the retrieval practice and self-test, or have someone quiz us, and avoid the illusion of knowing, thanks to neuroplasticity, we can usually recall what we want to. But our brains aren't great at academic learning, and so high school learning is harder than memorizing, plus schools are weird in ways that can make learning even harder. One last thing, change is hard, right? Change is hard. We're all creatures of habit, as this next slide says. Yep, creatures of habit, here it comes. There we go, okay. It's one thing to say, I'm going to study harder, I'm not going to play video games, I'm going to get organized this year, but making those changes is actually really hard for anybody. So if you want to perform better academically, it really isn't easy. Some of the recall tactics I've discussed will really help, though. And here are just 3 things you can do to make you a more effective student, to work smarter, not harder, as returners could probably pretty much recite from last year. Okay, number 1 is the importance of mindset. Know that you can get smarter. There are lots of brain myths out there. You hear people say, hey, I'm a pretty good multitasker. To which I say, no, you're not. Because no one is. The brain cannot multitask. So that's a myth. Or I'm a visual learner, or I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I can only learn when I'm taught kinesthetically, or whatever it is. I mean, learning styles are a thing, but that doesn't mean you can only learn when you're taught in that manner. You're not going to learn chemistry kinesthetically. It's not going to happen, okay? Anyway, the most damaging myth by far is that your intelligence is fixed. It isn't, okay? So back to the learning diagram. Long-term memory is the huge variable here. That's the huge variable. It's true that everyone has different levels of general intelligence, which is based mostly on genes and also on experiences and upbringing. But the more you learn, the more you can build on that learning to learn more, and the smarter you get in terms of understandings and skills. Again, that's neuroplasticity. I'm not saying that anyone can ponder the universe like Einstein or write like Toni Morrison if you just get after it enough. I'm not saying that. But dramatic improvement for just about anyone at any academic thing is possible if you work at it hard and strategically. Okay, number two, second thing is sleep uninterrupted. Okay? So, the research on the power of getting enough sleep to consolidate and move into long-term memory what you've learned is overwhelming. So try to get more of it when you can. Tough reality, as we all know, means that you're not going to be able to get the 9+ hours people your age are supposed to be getting to perform optimally. So when the chance does present itself, sleep. Also, turn off your alarm, turn off your phone, maybe your alarm. Also, for God's sakes, please don't sleep with your phone, okay? We have a handy visual here. Buzzing and lighting up all night. Letting people fall asleep a little and then waking them up is literally a form of torture. Torturers do that to torture people. So please stop. Okay, last thing, number 3. Change little things in your environment that will change your behavior. Within the quirky macro environment of school, you can change your micro environment and get results. So for instance, for the last 2 years, I've watched a lot of really successful students work in the MAC during the day and at night. And you know where their phones are? They're not out. With very few exceptions, their phones are not out. Unless they need their laptops, they're typically closed. Deep dives into academic learning are hard enough for your brain. Every time your brain surfaces to look at Snapchat or text or whatever it is, it takes several minutes to reach that depth again if you can ever get there. So a small environmental change like putting away your phone while you complete one homework subject, then allowing yourself 5 minutes, maybe 10 for screen time before moving on to the next subject, that can make a big difference. So you've been hearing a lot about Taft as family or Taft's aloha spirit a couple days ago. That is all true, and I think it's what makes Taft unique among academically rigorous boarding schools. But Taft is still an academically rigorous boarding school, and it's late September. Chances are you're now finding the academic part of Taft pretty hard, if you haven't already. What you've just seen and heard is a small sample of how the science of learning might help you navigate the school part of Taft. More helpful is meeting with Ms. May, Mr. Detlefs, or me in the MAC to see how all this applies, all this and more, actually a lot more, applies specifically to you and your courses. So please email us or just stop by. Good luck getting smarter, and I'll see you in the MAC.